In the latest episode, we described the basic command line parameters to Terraform CLI, the init, plan, apply, and destroy, where apply were to create the infrastructure and destroy was to take the very same files that we had with the infrastructure in them and ask Terraform to destroy them, to delete them. We also described the Terraform state file, terraform.tf state, which describes the currently created resources that we have, such that when we run terraform destroy, this file basically gets almost empty because we have deleted all the resources that we have. In this episode, we are going to continue with describing Terraform and move on to variables. As we said, Terraform is a minified language. It's not a full-blown Turing-complete programming language. It's a semi-JSON structured file, which I have to say is very clear when we look at it, because when we look at it, we can see resource AWS VPC, myVPC, which is the name, and then we define the CIDR, and we have good documentation. So JSON on its nature is describing objects, and as it's a semi-JSON, when we look at it, we look exactly at the objects that we are creating on the infrastructure, versus a Turing-complete programming language, like almost any language, where we look at the language and we see a set of instructions usually. We don't see the DSL, the domain-specific language. Here we do have a domain-specific language, and I think this is a great use case. And this also explains why Terraform is the number one infrastructure as code. Okay, so let's just move on to variables as promised. So because we have this structure, this semi-JSON that we give to Terraform and we ask it, please create this infrastructure, in case we repeat things in this semi-JSON, in these Terraform files, then we can create variables on another file. So we can create a folder named variables, and then we can create a file, variables.tf, and in this file we'll define a bunch of variables. The good news is that defining these variables is very similar to how we define the resources. When we define the resources, let's say an S3 bucket, then we wrote a resource, S3 bucket, my bucket, and then the parameters. Here, when we define variables, we define them the same, and we could then later on use the same variable multiple times. So here we define the variable with variable instead of resource, variable, VPC name, and the value inside the curly braces. Let's go deeper on this. Let's say that we want to define a variable of the VPC name, which would be myVPC. MyVPC would be the value for the variable name, VPC name. So the structure would be like this: variable, in quotes, VPC name, this is the name of the variable, start the curly braces, and in the curly braces, default is equals, and in quotes, myVPC. Let's repeat this: variable, quotes, VPC name, curly braces, default equals myVPC in quotes. Basically, we said variable, then we gave the variable name, then we started curly braces, and then we gave the value. The value we give to the variable with the keyword default. Okay, the default is the default value of the variable. We have a bunch of more parameters to give in the curly braces. We specify the type of the variable. Just like we specify default is myVPC, we can specify the type is string. So type is string. Every time I say is, it's like the equal sign. Type is string, or type is number, or we can say type is list brackets string, which would be a type of a list of strings. And basically this is it. We can define also a map with type map. So variable my map, curly braces, type is map, and then default key 1 is value 1, key 2 is value 2. Okay, we saw so far that we could have a string variable, we could have a number variable, we could have a list of string, we could have a map with type is map, We can also have tuple. What is a tuple? When we have a list in programming languages, it's usually of the same type. Tuple is like a list, but of multiple types, and we define for each index what is the type. So variable, my tuple, this is the name of the variable, curly braces, type is tuple, start brackets, and then in square brackets, if we want 3 items in this tuple, the first one would be string, number, string, then this would be type, tuple, braces, square braces, string, comma number, comma string. And then give the value inside square brackets. Default, we said that we use the default in order to give the values to the variable. So default is square braces, mystr1, comma 45, comma mystr2. We can also have object variables. So variable, my object, this is the name of the variable, curly braces, type is, guess what? Object. Object, start now again the standard braces, then start curly braces and give a name for each field, for each property of the object. So this would be type is object, braces, curly braces, name is string, port is number, port equals number, name equals string. So here we gave the object type, the types of the variables, and again, we can initialize it now with default. As we said, we initialize the variables with default. And then we specify for which name my val1, default 232. To use the variables, we write the letters var, and anywhere in our semi-JSON for Terraform, we use the letters var, and then dot the var name. If it's a list, var dot my list, square bracket 0, this would be index 0. We can also ask the user to fill in variables. In order for the user to fill in a variable, we just reference this variable that we didn't initialize, just don't initialize the variable with default. And in this case, when you want the message to appear to the user, put it in description inside the variable. So if we had variable input name, this is just the name of the variable, curly braces type string, description, please enter a value. We don't place here a default value, and therefore when we reference this variable, it would ask the customer to input this variable name. We can also print a value, because as we said, for example, the VPC ID is dynamically created upon running the Terraform apply. So we can print what is the VPC ID that was created. How do we print it? We write output. So we had so far resource keyword in order to have defined resources. We had variable keyword in order to define variables. And now we have another type, output, in order to output something to the screen. So output, my output, curly braces, value is AWS VPC.myVPC.id. In this case, because we said output and we defined inside the curly braces the value that we want to output, Terraform will be able to output the value inside the console. Note that if we just run Terraform plan, we would not have yet the VPC ID. So there would be nothing to print, because VPC ID is created upon actually creating the resources. So let's repeat this. All this is going to be in the description if it was hard to hear this. So all of this would exist in the description of the podcast episode, so you can reference to it. We said that we can define variables with the variable keyword and the variable name, and then we say what is the type string, list or boolean, a number. Then with the default inside the curly braces of the variable item, we give the actual value of the item, the variable. We can use variables with var dot the variable name. We can interactively ask the customer to input the variable name if we use the variable and just don't define its default value inside the structure. And we can output a variable by using print to the screen the variable value by just using the output, variable name, and then the value that we want to actually output. This was a brief introduction into variables inside Terraform.